Hi, I'm Lishan Huang from FUSA. I'm here with my colleague David Colby-Reed, who will join us a little later in Q&A. I'd like to tell you a little bit about FUSA, what we do, and give you some inspiration and some approaches for your work in Liverpool. FUSA is a community-centered design and strategy consultancy, and we design services and build capacity with our clients and their communities to solve social challenges and to just make their communities more interesting, more awesome places. We refer to our practice as community-centered design, and what that means is we work across different disciplines. For example, we use user experience design and storytelling and combine that with community management and movement building. The idea is that we build for and with the communities. Here's a metaphor that explains a little bit about our approach. So user-centered design, you've probably heard of that, or human-centered design. As David Colby likes to say, it's about creating decision environments or a menu of choices. So your iPod comes in different colors, or you see here in this menu for a vending machine in Japan, you can buy different kinds of ice cream based on the tastes of different customers. Community-centered design is similar, but it builds on it. It's more like a potluck. So it's a bring-your-own-dish kind of dinner party where you're bringing a lot of people in the community together to bring something to the table, and that can be a little bit messy as a process and it can be a little unpredictable, but it can also be really rewarding. Earlier this year, I had a conversation with Ethos magazine, and I talked about the importance of community and how we can cultivate community, but they shouldn't be co-opted, and we can never really fully control them. And I think it's just a leap of faith for many organizations and cultures that it can be scary. It requires cultural change and letting go of power, as well as a blurring of boundaries between the inside and outside of an institution. So we took a look at the 6 key growth opportunities that you have in Liverpool for your projects, and we came up with our own list. It's a list of 5 creative approaches that hopefully will give you inspiration to solve problems in your own communities. So the first approach is ethereal infrastructure. And by this, we mean rituals, events, happenings, things that are not brick and mortar, but things that just happen, like a flash mob. So one example of this is Name Tag Day. Now, Name Tag Day is an annual event started in New York City and now is in 4 cities around the world. And the idea is on the first Saturday in June of every year, volunteers pass out name tags in crowded urban spaces to encourage strangers to talk to each other, to introduce themselves to each other. It's a way of building cultural capital and to really change the social dynamic in a city, but it's ethereal, it's a one-day event. Name Tag Day was a grantee of the Awesome Foundation, which is a global network of micro-philanthropists, micro-donors that David and I are both a part of. And we funded this project because we thought it was awesome, and it seems like a very simple way, but very compelling way to get people to really change the social dynamics of a neighborhood and of a city. The second approach is called trash into treasure, and the idea behind this approach is to look at things that might be seen as trash or might be seen as undervalued, and then reimagine them as something that provides value. So this is an example, the Salvage Supper Club, which was a project by one of my students, Josh Treuhaft, at the School of Visual Arts here in New York. Josh was concerned with the amount of food waste that's in our ecosystem, and so he started organizing these pop-up dinner parties in cleaned out, repurposed trash containers, and then used salvaged food cooked by skilled chefs to prepare the food, to really change the idea of food waste and food that we think might be going bad but is actually perfectly good, perfectly delicious. Another project is the Low Line. We were advisors for the Low Line early on in their community engagement process and in their Kickstarter campaigns. The Low Line is trying to build an underground park. You see an architectural rendering here. And this park would be underground using fiber optic technology developed by one of the co-founders to bring light into this park. This underground space is currently underutilized. It's actually an abandoned trolley terminal that has been abandoned for decades. So the idea would be to revitalize the space that's seen as completely unknown and abandoned and turn it into a space that's vibrant for public use. The third idea or approach is heritage remixed. So it's really looking similar to Trash into Treasure, of looking at the history or historical areas or culture of a given place, a given city, and to really change it and update it for modern times. This is Governor's Island. This is an island between Manhattan and Brooklyn here in New York City. It's right in the harbor of New York. And during colonial times, it was actually reserved for the residents of the colonial governors under the British. And today, it's a place that's open to the public during the summertime. But for a long time, it was actually an army base, it was a military installation, and it was then abandoned for many years. Over the summer, our friends at Sextant Works had an artist residency in an old house on Governor's Island, and they called it a placemaking lab. The photo you see here is a picture of a lockpicking workshop. And now here are a couple pictures from my workshop. I taught a workshop called Mischievous Movement, and it was an improvisational movement workshop for experienced designers, performers, and dancers. Here's another shot of the workshop in action. But the idea here is to take these spaces that were formerly abandoned but have historical value and to revive them and turn them into something else. Number 4 is visualize the invisible. So 596 Acres is another project that was funded by the Awesome Foundation. And what they do is they have an online map that maps out publicly owned space that's totally abandoned or underutilized. So here's a sign on a place that could be a community garden, but it's owned by a government agency and they have no current plans to use it. So the idea of 596 Acres is to visualize these spaces and then provide online and offline tools so that members from that community can self-organize and lobby government agencies to make that space available so they can turn that land into a park or to a community garden, etc. The final example is Be the Chimera. So this is a project we've been involved in for several years called Miles, or Made in the Lower East Side. And one of the things that they do is they are a storefront transformer. So they organize pop-up events, parties, galleries, and retail spaces. Of course, the chimera comes from Greek mythology. It's an animal, a mythical beast that's made out of parts from different animals. So it reminds me of the Steve Jobs quote, "Creativity is just connecting things." Fast Company called Miles like Airbnb for storefronts. And Miles was really operating on the Lower East Side to begin with to fill empty commercial spaces and to make a business case for landlords to open that space up to emerging entrepreneurs and the community. Today, Miles has turned into an international network of spaces. So Miles makes spaces available in New York City, London, Chicago, Vancouver, and Toronto. But it's not just Airbnb for storefronts. Miles is a hybrid organization. It's part online platform, part consulting company, part events company. And we've also been involved with Miles recently on their Do Tank. So sort of like a think tank, but a Do Tank, where people are doing things. And we've opened up this Do Tank to members of the community. It's sort of a design studio lab that's free and open to the public. And we've been working this fall on a series with the students where they're building out a pop-up space to address the issue of food sustainability and waste in urban environments. And we'll be partnered with Makeshift Magazine later this year in a pop-up space to address this issue. But the idea is that Miles is part educational company, part Airbnb for storefronts, part consulting company, and it's a hybrid. So in your interventions, think about how you can create these chimera or hybrids and build a system around them. So that's all. Didn't have very much time to share today, but we look forward to your questions in Q&A. All right, thanks.